So is this a familiar scene to anyone? I know it is to me, and I'm sure you've read all of the Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Mashable articles about how technology is destroying the fabric of America and how your kids are going to have ruined lives because of cell phones. But I actually do think that cell phones and social media create problems for us in terms of our ability to meaningfully connect with the people around us. And it's not just an issue for our own personal happiness and our own personal well-being, but there are broader implications for our society and our country. If you're like me, you're an avid follower of politics. And so in the 2016 political campaign, you probably are familiar with this map, but it's a county-by-county breakdown of who voted for Donald Trump and who voted for Hillary Clinton. And I don't think you have to be a political scientist to look at this map to realize that as a country, we're deeply divided. The good news is I have a solution. They're board games. I don't mean to be trite. I don't mean to be trivial. ACA is repealed and you lose your health insurance. Board games can't help. But they do have an amazing ability to bring folks together. We know this because people, frankly, have been playing board games for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Here you see a depiction of an ancient Chinese painting where folks are playing the strategy game Go, which is kind of similar to chess. This was invented in 4000 BC, so in many ways, board gaming is the oldest human hobby that there is. We also know from modern science and modern clinical trials that board games are really good for your brain. They're good for cognitive function. They're good for critical thinking skills. And if you're a young person, a child, or you're an older adult, really good for social interaction, forming social bonds, and strengthening those bonds over time. But when I say board games, many of you are probably thinking of this one. I hate this game. What I'd like to spend the rest of the time talking about tonight is not Monopoly or some of the other games you probably grew up playing, but talk about the modern advent of Euro-style board gaming and modern board gaming as it's known. Some of you might be familiar with this game, Settlers of Catan. It was made in the mid-90s by a guy named Klaus Teuber. And what Klaus Teuber did, along with some other avant-garde game designers at the time, was they took kind of the traditional rules about how you build a board game, and they threw them out the window. So really radical what they were doing, and since then it's spawned kind of the golden age of board games. These games are characterized by a few things. Indirect competition. They favor strategy over luck, themes of economics and trade over war and conflict. And finally, they have balanced game mechanics. So if you're starting in the first of the game, by the end of the game, you're still involved in a meaningful way. Another thing these European-style games do really well, I love this picture, is they tell stories. They put you and your friends kind of at the center of this epic narrative, and they give you dice, and they give you cards, and they say, complete the story. But you can have the best story in the world, you can have the best game mechanics in the world. If you don't have beautifully designed board games that you want to pick up the pieces and play with and engage with in a tangible and meaningful way, you probably won't have a commercially successful game. So with this in mind, I'd like to talk really quickly about three games that I think kind of epitomize a lot of these characteristics. The first is Ticket to Ride. So Ticket to Ride, which will come up right now, it's incredibly commercially successful. You can buy it in any Target or Walmart in America. But essentially the theme is you're a turn-of-the-century titan of industry in the Gilded Age, and you're building your railroad empire across Europe or across the United States. Another game that's incredibly fun to play is a game called Carcassonne. Unlike Monopoly, when you open the box and take out the board, with Carcassonne you actually build the board turn by turn by placing these tiles. So no two board is the same, no two games are the same, and no two boards ever look the same. Finally, I'd like to talk about Pandemic. Pandemic is a cooperative board game. So unlike the previous two, you're actually on the same team with everybody around the table with you, and you're working to beat the game rather than beat each other. The theme's also really fun because you're research scientists from the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, and you're traveling all over the globe treating viruses. So I think it's a common misperception that the board game industry is dying or dead. It couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, over the last decade, we've seen 10+% year-over-year growth. But I think the thing that's more interesting than data on board game sales is how board gamers and board game culture have the ability to unlock new economic models. What you see here is snakes and lattes. Spoiler alert, it's a board game cafe. It was the first one of its kind. It opened in Toronto in 2012. And since this photo was taken, we've seen a proliferation of these cafes all across Canada, all across the United States. At their core, they're a very simple concept, right? They take a traditional cafe or bar or restaurant, and then you throw in hundreds of board games and board game experts who can help teach you games or kind of remind you rules to games if you don't remember. But at their core, they're just fun, cool community spaces where you can gather together. And what I like most about them is if you look at this picture, you see kind of a lot of young adults who are hanging out. But this is a picture from the same establishment, and you see a lot of kids, and you see a lot of families. So it's one of the few places, I think, in our society where you actually get a lot of intergenerational mingling. You get people from different cultures, and you get different backgrounds. And I think probably now more than ever, I think we need that in this country and in our own community here in Asheville. So, in conclusion, I'm not advocating that you destroy your cell phones. I think cell phones are awesome, but don't because of this. But instead, maybe as you're planning your activities for the rest of the weekend, I would encourage you to put down your cell phone and instead maybe meet up with your friends and go to a local gaming store and pick up one of the games I've introduced tonight. Sit around a table and maybe open your mind to what modern board games can do for you, your friendships, your relationships, and then our community here. Thank you very much.